Welcome to Mental Makeover Radio, your go-to destination for meaningful conversations about mental health. I'm your host and your trusted therapist bestie, Cecilia Manella. Join us as we explore the complexities and messiness of human experience by addressing your questions and concerns. I'm here to provide a straightforward and practical therapy advice. So grab your favorite beverage, whether it's tea, coffee, or whatever tickles your taste buds, and get ready to embark on a mental makeover. Hello and welcome to Mental Makeover Radio. I'm your host, Cecilia Manella. Thank you for tuning in today. I have a bit of a cold, so bear with me as I navigate this episode with a bit of a strange sounding voice. If I were to ask you, what topic do you argue the most about in a relationship? What would your answer be? I'm going to guess it's going to be one of three: money, sex, or communication, because we know that those are the top three hot topics that most couples actually fight about. Today, we're going to dive into intimacy and sex and how to improve intimacy without being so focused on sex. So if you have some little people around you or little ears that are listening, I encourage you to throw in some headphones and keep this podcast episode a little bit more private as we're diving into some adult content. We have such a convoluted relationship with intimacy and sex. You know, we live in this paradox where two opposite things are true at the same time. We don't talk about sex very much, and yet we're overly sexualized. Everywhere you turn, you see how sex is used to sell everything from vehicles to clothing to makeup to homes to alcohol to everything. Overly sexualized individuals are used to sell lots of products. So talking about sex and intimacy is awkward, and most couples don't talk enough about sex, yet most couples report that they have the most conflict over sex. So it's kind of funny how the one thing that you don't talk about is the one thing you fight about most. It's a bit of a challenge when we don't know how to talk about sex and intimacy, and when we do talk about it, then it just leads to conflict. So on the one hand, you want more sex, and on the other hand, you don't really know how to talk about it. And then when you do talk about it, it's always about fighting about it. This complicated relationship with the topic of sex and intimacy fosters so much disconnection and dissatisfaction in relationships, leaving most people assuming that if they had more sex, then everything would be good and the fighting would go away. But let me ask you this. Have you found that to actually be true? I'm going to guess that you found that increase in the frequency is short-lived. And then you're right back to the conflict, which can leave you feeling hopeless and unsure on how to fix the problem. And often most couples then go to a place of saying they're just have different sex drives and that this is going to be a source of conflict for the rest of the relationship. We often talk about sex and intimacy really interchangeably as if they mean the same thing, but they actually don't. They mean very different things. Intimacy is a feeling of being close and emotionally connected and supported. It means being able to share a whole range of thoughts, feelings, and experiences that we have as being a human being on this planet. Connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen and heard and valued. Whereas sex can include intimacy, but the definition of sex, typically refers to the act of using words and or touch to cause sexual arousal in another person or persons. So sex is about sexual arousal and intimacy is about connection and feeling close to another person. Now they can exist together or they can exist separately. You can have intimacy without sex and you can have sex without intimacy. In relationships, most people want more intimacy because intimacy leads to better sex. But we often talk about we just want more sex. But what we're really talking about is we want more intimacy. We want to focus on quality and not quantity, because research shows that quantity of sex does not lead to a better relationship. But in fact, the quality of the sexual connection is what grows desire in a relationship and increases relationship satisfaction. So we're going to focus on growing intimacy. What I've learned from working with couples for over 15 years is that when we focus on growing intimacy, people feel more inclined to want sexual connection, because the opposite's also true. When there's low intimacy, I'm going to bet there's almost 100% chance that there's very little sexual activity. So intimacy is the gateway to connection in your relationship. And when we've been in a long-term relationship, we seem to lose track of intimacy somehow. We assume that being together for a long period of time, whether it's a year, 2 years, 5, 20, 50, means that we don't work as hard at creating this intimacy, that it should just automatically be there somehow. That's actually not true. Keeping the intimacy fire going is what makes long-term relationships healthy. And it's a predictor of more sexual desire, having intimacy. So intimacy is what makes us feel safe and feel loved and feel seen in a relationship. When intimacy is high, conflict is easier to navigate. Collaboration can feel more natural. We have a stronger sense of connection to our partner. So I'm going to share with you 5 easy ways you can increase intimacy in your relationship that aren't really focused on sex. And maybe these apply to you. Maybe you can share this episode with your partner and can create some conversation, which is always my hope, that these podcast episodes increase conversation between people. So we're going to start with increasing non-sexual touch and giving non-physical compliments. So we're, focusing a little bit on words of affirmation and some touch. Oftentimes when there's been conflict over sex, all touch can feel like a trap, that there's some sort of hidden agenda at play by the partner who actually wants more sex. So all touch isn't avoided because there's a fear that it's going to lead into a conflict, or it's going to lead to rejection, or it's going to lead to more disconnection. The way around this is to have more non-sexual touch. Hugging, touching a shoulder, hand on the back, playing with your partner's hair, a head massage, holding hands, a kiss on the forehead, and the list goes on and on and on. The key is that the touch isn't intended to lead to anything more than just the touch. This creates connection to each other outside of it being sexual. We need touch that isn't connected to sex. We need touch that feels nurturing, loving, and it feels safe, and that it doesn't always have to lead to sex, because if it always leads to sex, then someone's going to shut that down. So it's creating a new baseline. Research shows that when we experience affectionate touch, like hugs, areas of our brain that are involved in our fight and flight, that kind of stress response that lives in the sympathetic nervous system, is deactivated, in that fewer stress hormones such as cortisol are released, and it increases oxytocin levels. And oxytocin is the love endorphin. So it helps us in healing some of those negative feelings such as loneliness, isolation, and anger. And this just comes from like one good hug, like one long, kind of like that bear hug where you just kind of are held by another person. If you've had a hug from somebody who's a good hugger, and hopefully you have someone in your life that gives really good hugs, there's a moment in that hug where you find yourself releasing yourself into the hug. That's what we're looking for, is that sense of leaning into this touch that is safe, that is loving, and that isn't sexual. Now, the same goes for compliments that are non-physical. This is especially true for women, as society has really hypersexualized women since birth, pretty much. And many women have had to experience unsafe sexual touch or unsafe sexual words. You love your partner for more than their appearance. Focus on the things and tell them. Tell them that you love their character, how they manage, a certain situation, the way that they laugh, the way that they take care of you, the way that they nurture, the way that they're funny, the way that they're kind and just are, a good friend or a good parent or a good sibling or anything else that you want to share. The list is endless. Ask yourself, what do I love about this person, this human that you have picked to be in a relationship with? What do you love about them? And then I want you to tell them. It doesn't have to be all at once. It can be slowly over time, but you need to tell them. The second way to improve intimacy without being about sex is to flirt with each other again. Never stop dating each other. How often do you intentionally flirt with your partner? I want you to remember and take you back to when you first met and you were first dating. Maybe that was a year ago. Maybe that was 5 years ago. Maybe it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever that was. When everything was new and exciting about this person, how easy it was to flirt, to wink, to smile, to make eye contact, to be playful with each other. That's the energy that we want. What would happen if you brought even 10% of that energy back into your relationship? How can you increase some of that flirting? Because flirting isn't just sexual. We often think about flirting being about sex, and it isn't. Flirting is about curiosity about the other person, where we engage with them, where we see them, where we give them our full attention with no distractions, which means putting our phones down and putting the phone away, giving your full attention to your partner. Flirting can be about, being attuned to the other person, to see them, to truly hear them and what they're saying to you, getting rid of those distractions and being able to be playful with each other. So this is about never stop dating each other. This isn't about going out on dates and spending a tons of money. This is about emotionally attunement, emotionally showing up and letting the other person know that they are desirable, that they're attractive, and not just their physical appearance, but them as a human on the planet, that there's someone that you want to spend time with, that you want to be around with, that you laugh with. Get back into some of these things that you used to do at the early onset of your relationship and bring some of those things back. The third thing you can do is increasing vulnerability. Now, I know that vulnerability is all out there and there's a lot of content out there about it, but let me tell you this. Vulnerability is needed in any relationship, not just intimate partner relationships, but pretty much any relationship. And it's how we share who we are in the presence of another. So according to Brené Brown, the definition of vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And it is the most accurate measure of courage. So I want you to increase vulnerability in your relationship. And this can happen by talking about hard things and keeping each other emotionally safe. It can be working on solving a problem together. It could be collaborating on solutions instead of being on opposite sides and fighting with each other. It's about fighting for each other and fighting for your relationship and not against each other. There has to be a willingness to learn from the other, to truly believe in your partner's ideas and their thoughts and their feelings, that they have value, that you're better collaborating together than fighting to be right. The second you are right fighting, you both lose. So shifting positions to allies instead of being, opposites can increase vulnerability very, very quickly. It allows each person in the relationship to share their messy bits, their uncertain thoughts and feelings, maybe parts of themselves that they feel like their darkness. To truly expose themselves to another person and to feel safe and loved is vital in a relationship. It is vital to increasing intimacy when you can be vulnerable and authentic and messy and not perfect. To drop, the expectation of perfection in a relationship and be willing to do it messy, to not have the answer, to not know what the outcome is, to share something about you that maybe is strange and weird and you're not really sure how to say it, but to actually share that. And to also make space for your partner to do that, to ask some questions about vulnerability, to ask and be curious and openly without judgment, creates a safe space for vulnerability. The fourth thing that you can do is dream together. When was the last time you shared your hopes and dreams with your partner? Like, really? When was the last time you asked your partner about their hopes and dreams? Again, this is what we do when we're dating and we get to know each other. And then, we just kind of lose track of the magic of it, as if our hopes and dreams are rigid and that they don't change over time. It's like, well, I knew what your hopes and dreams were 5 years ago, therefore I don't need to ask them anymore. And that's just not true. We have to know that we're constantly evolving. But when we do ask these questions around hopes and dreams, and we engage in dreaming together, it allows us to see into their hearts. It allows us to see beyond the presentation. We all have that kind of public persona, this kind of, maybe it's a suit we put on, a mask that we put on for the world. And when we're dating, earlier on in a relationship and we share some of our hopes and dreams, it allows the other person to see beyond that mask, beyond the presentation of something, and we let them into our hearts. The truth is that we're constantly changing. And I hope we're changing, because if you're the same person today that you were 5 years ago, there's a little bit of a problem. I hope that in 5 years, I'm a different person than I am today. And I hope today that I'm a different person than I was 2 years ago. Our dreams change, and honestly, they should. Getting back to curiosity with your partner will allow you to genuinely wonder what's going on in your partner's world, their heart, their mind, their soul, who they are. This is really where the gold is. This is where the amazingness and the magical and the beauty of your partner actually lies, is in this messy, gushy part. It requires us to be truly open to listening. And what does that mean? It means to listen openly without thinking about a response, to be curious without judgment, to be open to listening to somebody without a preconceived notion of what it might mean for me or the other person, to sit in wonder of the human that you have chosen to be with. We lose track of that in a relationship. You chose to be with this human, and your partner chose to be with you. And there should be a little bit of magic in that, and a little bit of wonderment of how this person is evolving and changing and growing. And we need to be curious about that person. And some of that is about asking about hopes and dreams, and what are we dreaming together? What do we want? It's not necessarily about goal setting, about working towards something that is achievable. Sometimes it's just about dreaming about the wonderment of who we are and the beauty of being human. The fifth tip I have, or the last one I have, of ways to improve intimacy in your relationship without it being focused on sex, is to create some new energy. Now, the easiest way to create new energy in your relationship is to have an adventure together. Okay, so it's getting out of a routine. Every couple has their routine, how they do their work week, how they do their weekends, how they do their holidays and vacations. And over time, it becomes predictable. And predictable is not bad. The safety of predictability is where love exists. But what we miss is that novelty of something new, and predictability sometimes can get a little bit boring. And, boring is not great. It doesn't allow for a lot of connection sometimes. When was the last time you had an adventure together? When's the last time you learned something new together? When was the last time you did something new that neither one of you have done before? Or maybe you had a true competition against each other. Novelty, doing something new and different leads to laughter and playfulness, and we embrace our differences and we learn more about each other. You are an evolving human being, and so is your partner. They have thoughts and feelings that you're not aware of. They have new desires that you don't even know about. They have interests that are changing just as much as you do. And, having an adventure together brings that back into light. The best part of dating is all the firsts. All the first things we do together. The first time we go for dinner, the first time someone spends the night, the first time we have an adventure, the first time we go hiking, the first time we go kayaking, the first time we go camping, the first time we take a vacation together, all the first. And then we lose track of them and we get stuck in routines because routines feel really comfortable. You can be intentional in creating more firsts to spark some more novelty and curiosity and each other, because there are things about each other that you don't even know about yet, that you haven't even tapped into, regardless of whether you've been together a year or you've been together 25 years. There's parts of you that you have not shared with your partner yet. And there's parts of your partner that they have not shared with you. And this, I hope, creates curiosity and wonderment and excitement to engage in more intimacy and more closeness and getting to know each other without the intention of sex at the end of this rainbow, but just being engaged in the wonderment of the rainbow to begin with. These are 5 easy ways to improve intimacy that can bring back a spark, a bit of life into your relationship, and can add more color or dimension to the routine. It's the easiest way to get unstuck and create some new energy. Now, with more intimacy comes more desire. And that's where you can start having conversations about sex. But it's really difficult to have conversations about sex when intimacy is completely missing, because intimacy creates safety and it creates a sense of wanting to lean into some uncomfortableness to get to a different place. So you can't really just fight and argue about sex. You have to focus on intimacy first, because that's what comes first. Then the sexual desire grows, and then we can talk about sexual connection. But I want you to really focus on improving intimacy first. And relationships are not a zero-sum game. If you're in it for the longer term, then there's really no rush. There's time, but it is about making the moments of intimacy valuable and important and something that you have fun doing together. We need to remember that relationships can be fun and playful, and we lose that playful energy with all the responsibilities that we have and all the pressures that come from the external world to your internal world. Intimacy is a source of energy in your relationship. The truth is we can live without sex. I mean, some will argue with me and say, absolutely not, but the truth is we can. But we can't really live well without intimacy. We need connection to thrive as humans on this planet. No matter how fancy we've become over the ages, over the decades and centuries, we are still humans at our core, and we need connection to thrive. We need connection to, feel good about ourselves and others in the world. Which of the 5 tips will you implement? Which one are you going to commit to? Commit to one and see how it goes. Run an experiment. Maybe it'll be about planning a fun adventure. Maybe it can be about sending some flirty text messages about what you appreciate about your partner. Or maybe it's a date at home that doesn't cost you any money, where there's no interruptions and you can just talk about each other's hopes and dreams. Whatever you do it with intention. Own it. Do it awkwardly. Do it imperfectly. Do it messy. You deserve to jump in and do it messy. Love is messy. And perfection isn't expected. And to be honest, perfection is not even attainable when it comes to relationships, because we're just too messy. We're not a mathematical equation that can be perfect. Trust yourself and your relationship that it can grow in the messy. And the fact is that's where it grows best, when things are a little bit messy. So do it, commit to it, and own it. I hope you found today's episode helpful. And I really want you to share this with your partner and facilitate some conversation. Share it with your friends who maybe need to listen to this. If you have a specific question and want to be featured on the podcast, there's a convenient link in the show notes for you to submit your question. Thanks again for being part of the Mental Makeover community. Until next time, be bold, be brave, be well.